The Athletic. He is found on Twitter at Chris Camrani, and you can find him, I think, doing one of his Q&A mailbags today. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, anybody who wants to come ask me anything about anything, I am going to be on the internet for an hour.
Anything about anything. It's a wide-open mailbag today?
It's always wide open. I welcome football questions. I welcome non-related football questions. I'm not here to judge anybody. We can talk about any topic they want.
So if do you have to be a subscriber to throw these questions at you? Is that the one caveat?
That's the hook.
Okay, well, if you've always wanted to ask Chris Camrani something about anything, it might be worth your $5.99 for a trial month up at theathletic.com. How are you?
I'm doing well, Bill. How are you?
Doing good. All right, so what's your big take? I've been kind of asking throughout the early part of the week, first of 2 byes for Utah, but a month of football's gone, 5 games, and they're 4-1. What have you seen from this team that's impressed you, and what have you seen from this team through 5 games that maybe still gives you a little pause moving forward?
Yeah, I keep thinking back to our chat after the SC game, and you kind of gave me the 3 potential platforms of worry, and I think I chose the wrong one. I think you chose the right one. I think I chose that I was worried how the Utah offense was going to be able to go without Zach Moss. 1 game through, they've proven me wrong. Granted, Washington State does not have a good defense, so Utah did what it should have done because Utah's the better team. But I think the takeaway right now positively is Tyler Huntley's probably playing his best football as a Ute. Still hasn't thrown in an interception. Only has, I think, 29 incompletions in 5 games, and I think you could maybe go as high as 10 of those have just been straight drops by receivers, tight ends, and running backs that have hit their hands. So he is in a groove. I guess some pause, I would say, I don't know, the offensive line played well against Wazoo. The secondary played well against Wazoo. I'm just interested to see how the offense gets going against a better defense once they, get into the meat of the schedule. No offense to Oregon State.
Yeah, Oregon State coming up next. But, you never know. Given days, I wouldn't have thought UCLA would have gone to the Palouse and beaten Washington State either. So
Right. No, that's very true. So, yeah, it's like we talked about, nobody cannibalizes itself like the Pac-12, so there are no off weeks.
So you know Utah football pretty well. You've been around the program for a while. You went to school at the University of Utah. It's interesting to me. I asked the question yesterday of Utah fans, 5 games in, a month into the season, what still concerns you? And people brought up, the month of November, it's still looming. And I think they kind of dispelled that a little bit with the 3-1 record last year with mostly backups. Red zone offense, which totally get that. Special teams, offensive line. But I got, I won't say a lot, but maybe 10 or 15% of people saying Tyler Huntley still gives them some pause or some concern. And I don't know if that's injury history, Chris, or what, but it's very interesting to me. Most people have bought in. The national folks, the regional folks, the Pac-12 folks are all buying in, but there's still, it seems to be a faction of Utah fans that aren't in on Huntley yet. And that's a little surprising to me, especially based on really what he's done from October of last year till now.
Well, I think there's always going to be a faction of fans who are going to find any reason to be disgruntled about anything. If I'm not mistaken, there were fans who were frustrated after Utah went 13-0 in 2008. So you can't please everybody, unfortunately. But to your point about Tyler, I think he's doing everything that's being asked of him, and I think this is the most ideal offense for him. Being able to run the ball and establish that run game just sets him up so well in that play action pass game, and that's what he's so good at, because once you can get him out on the move, he can be a threat, with his legs. And granted, he wants to be able to throw the ball first, but Andy Ludwig tailored this offense to Zach Moss in that running game first and foremost for a reason, but Tyler Huntley is a huge part of this, and as we saw the last couple of games, Tyler kept them in that game at USC, and without those gigantic plays that the defense gave up, Utah they had a chance to tie the game in the fourth quarter. So I think it should go without saying that Tyler Huntley is playing the best that he's ever been playing at Utah. And again, I want to be able to see how this offense looks with or without Zach once they face some of the better defenses in the league.
An interesting subplot was thrown out by Kyle Whittingham in the postgame the other night, the fact that Bamidele Olaseni is now eligible. And he's suited. So the question is, where do you play him? He's got 4 games. I think ideally he's got 2 years to play 1, so you play him 4 this year, and then you have a full game, full roster of him next year. So it'd be interesting to see how they stick him in, because by all accounts, when I've talked to Kyle Whittingham, he's been a monster in practice.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those things where they have to play their cards right, because obviously you want to find the right 4 games to play Bam, but in what situation do you throw him in there? Granted, the end of the schedule is always more important than the middle of the schedule. I mean, you obviously have to win all your games, but if there's an injury factor that Utah has later on in the season, if they're playing for a spot in the Pac-12 championship game, you want to be able to have as much depth as you can. That's going to be definitely a fascinating subplot of the season, is to see how Bam handles himself if and when he gets in, because he's a huge guy, and Kyle Whittingham and the staff have been kind of waiting at bated breath to see when he got cleared. He got cleared before the Wazoo game, and now he's eligible. My guess would be, if Utah stays healthy, Darren Paulo is your left tackle. Simi Moala is a young guy. He's had some learning curve at that right tackle spot. I wouldn't be surprised if there are maybe a few package plays. If Utah's in a blowout, maybe they get Bam in at that right tackle spot, because I think that's where he'll learn the position this year. I ultimately believe he'll be, in the contention for the left tackle spot next year in his first and only full season at Utah. He's built for that. So I'm interested to see how they kind of implement Bam the rest of the season as well.
Yeah, it's just finding that spot, because we always talk so much about, the cohesion on the line, and those guys still haven't played together. I think it's only 3 or 4 full games now, or I think it's 3 full games of the 5 they've played that those 5 guys up front have played together. So it's kind of that tricky situation, unless you get blowout games in like a fourth quarter of a blowout game. How do you get some reps when you know that reps with the same 5 guys are probably the key to what you do?
Totally, yeah. And I guess in retrospect, maybe they could have got him in at the end of that Wazoo game, first game dressed. Maybe they could have thrown him in there. But there's a lot of football left to be played. And look at me sounding like a cliched coach, but there's a lot of games left, and you don't know who's going to go down with an injury, who's going to get sick, what can happen. So you're just going to need to preserve the health of your best guys. And on paper, Bam is one of their best guys, but we still haven't really seen him. We haven't seen him in any game reps. You can see him on Huddle, you can see him on YouTube, but we haven't seen him go against Division I Pac-12 talent yet.
Yeah, I think if they get a big second-half lead against Oregon State, or maybe in a few weeks against somebody else, maybe that's when you stick him in for a series or 2 just to let him get his feet wet. Then you've got 3 games still to play with after that. But I think you've just got, at some point in time, you kind of have to break that seal and put him in a game and let him play for a few series just to see what the speed of the game looks like.
No, I totally agree. And I think, we talked a lot with Kyle about Bam in fall camp, and he got here late. And I think a lot of people expected Bam to be able to come in and play right away. He's just an interesting guy with an interesting backstory. And I was able to talk to a lot of the coaches that helped teach him the game overseas in London and at Garden City, and pretty much the consensus was, if you can get this guy a year in the program without the pressure of being a starter in year 1, he can develop into being as high as a first-round draft pick his last year at Utah. That's not what my opinion is. Obviously, that's what I was told by guys that taught him the game. So the ceiling is high. I guess it's easy to compare like a Garrett Bowles, just because they're both highly touted JC transfers, same position for the most part. So it's going to be interesting to see what Bam does for sure.
Chris Camrani for a moment or 2 more with us here. I'm a firm believer that after you've seen 4 or 5 games of a team, you have a pretty good feel for who that team is. I think you can get incrementally better, but 4 or 5 games in, nobody's going to make major leaps. You can fall backwards if you have some key injuries, but I think after 4 or 5 games, would you agree you know who most of these teams are and basically what they are? They can get a little bit better here and there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, injuries are always, to your point, injuries always are a factor. You can have a star player go down, and we've seen a lot of star players in this conference go down in the first month of the season. I think 5 Pac-12 quarterbacks have been hurt in the first, 5 to 6 weeks, it's pretty astounding to see. So that will give any fan a reason to hold their breath. But I think just that game at Wazoo, for me, made the loss at USC a little more, inexplicable, because Utah just played its most un-Utah game, especially defensively, that I can remember. And obviously, it's hindsight is 20/20, but man, I just think Utah showed in that Wazoo game, when it's locked in, it's the best team in the conference, or at least in the South. I'll say in the South. But yeah, that SC game, I don't want to look back and dwell on anything, but it's still going to be the weirdest game that I can remember watching in a long time.
Yeah, I agree. So if I ask you the question with that in mind, teams can go quite a bit backwards. You'll grow a little bit forwards. Give me the number of teams in your mind today on October 2nd you think can win this league.
I'll just go 3.
Okay.
Oregon, Washington, Utah. I don't think USC is deep enough to compete with the North schools in a one-off, especially if Slovis is good. He was good for one game and not good in one game, and Matt Fink had his YOLO outing, and he kind of came back to earth against a really good defense in Washington. 1-2 right now for me is Oregon and Washington. I think that game will be a huge barometer test for me to see who's kind of the alpha in the North, because I think they match up really well. And to be honest with you, I wasn't too high on Jacob Eason the first couple of weeks of the season, but he seems to have turned it on and found his groove. And Jake Browning was kind of like that, I don't want to say an underdog because he was a star, but he was kind of a gritty guy that found a way to get it done. Jacob Eason is kind of like the all intangibles SEC type looking quarterback, and he obviously was for a while at Georgia. So that's a long-winded way of saying I think for me it's Oregon, Washington, Utah at the moment.
Yeah, I would only throw SC in there because of their high-end talent. I think, and they've got 2 wins under their belt already. They've got a tough schedule.
Yeah.
I don't know what ASU is. I know it's 4 or 5 games in. We should have a feel, but with a freshman quarterback and their offensive line may get a little bit better. I don't think that they can win the league. I think they could play spoiler, though. I think they could ruin Utah or USC's chances to win the league, but I don't think they could. So I'll kind of go 3.5 with you. I'll go Utah,
okay.
Oregon, Washington, and maybe half of a USC, just because they've got so much high-end talent. But it really depends on their health, and they missed a bunch of guys last week at Washington, and getting some stability at quarterback, whether it's Slovis or Fink, for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I agree. ASU is one that I should probably throw into the mix as well, just because Herm Edwards teams don't ever get blown out. I mean, they might play a gritty brand of football, but you rarely see them down more than 10 points in any game. I mean, they played Michigan State extremely well the last 2 years in those non-conference games, and obviously found ways to win. So it's one of those things where Herm has those guys ready. It just depends on which team kind of shows up on that day. And I'm sure you're the same way. I wasn't surprised at all to see ASU go to Berkeley and beat Cal. No offense to Cal, because Cal's a good team, but they're not the belle of the ball of the Pac-12.
No, they're very, as our friend Gordy Chiesa likes to say, they have court tilt, they have field tilt. They're really good on defense.
Yep.
And to me, they were average on offense, and then when their quarterback went out, they became very below average with Devon Modster. It looked like he had never played the position, even though he had it UCLA though.
Yeah, I remember when he was one of the many quarterbacks that I think Utah faced last year when they were down at UCLA, or the year before.
Yeah,
maybe.
It was the year before.
Yeah.
So, all right, enjoy your chat. I'll let you go because I'm sure you have to get mentally prepared for the mailbag and the chat that's coming up here at noon, right?
Yeah, I need a shot of espresso. That's all I need.
Go get it. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Chris. Chris Camrani with us here on the Bill Riley Show today.